All right. Hello and welcome to Really Cool People, a podcast produced by Schweitzer Church. I'm your host, Jason Leininger. This is a place to hear stories of really cool people. The hope is that as you and I listen, we'll be inspired, encouraged, and challenged through moments of serendipity. In the sermon entitled The Weight of Glory, C.S. Lewis said, "There are no ordinary people. You and I have never talked to a mere mortal." It's my joy over the next few moments to introduce you to somebody who may seem somewhat ordinary, especially themselves, and yet they're a really cool person. Today, we're going to meet Wes Duwe. Wes is going to talk about how he was born and raised in Kansas and spent much of his career there, and how he met his wife, and how one of the favorite things that they have to do is go camping in a fifth wheel trailer. So lean in and let's listen to Wes Duwe. Today in studio, we've got Wes Duwe. Welcome, Wes.
I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. Let's start with your story.
All right. I was born in Anthony, Kansas. That's a town of about 3,000 people near the Kansas-Oklahoma border. It's about 60 miles southwest of Wichita. Anthony is where I graduated from high school. It is the town where we did our shopping and other business transactions for the family. Anthony is located near Freeport, Kansas. Freeport is a much smaller town, but one that has been an important part of my life. I went to a small 2-classroom grade school there. There were just 3 students in my grade school graduating class. We had 2 classrooms in the building. One was for grades 1 through 4, the other for grades 5 through 8. I have fond memories of Freeport and of my school experience there. I don't feel in any way handicapped I don't feel in any way handicapped by having attended this little school. It is a connection to past America which I cherish. No longer exists. In the past few years, sadly, the residents of Freeport voted to unincorporate the town because it reduced their property taxes. Freeport has a Presbyterian church which is still operating. Like the town, it has dwindled in size. But this little church is also an important part of my life. My parents were married in this church. My grandparents were members of this church for many decades. And for several years, I have given this church some monthly support. I think it will be a sad day when it finally has to close its doors, but I know that day will come when this happens. Freeport, the small town of Freeport, also has a cemetery where many of my relatives are buried. Alice and I already have our cemetery stone in this cemetery where we will one day be buried in the 2 grave sites between my parents and her parents, both of which are already there. My father was a grain and cattle farmer. I spent my summers growing up driving tractors in our fields. I think by the time I was in the 5th grade, I was a professional tractor driver, and I soon became a professional combine driver also. After becoming an adult, I would always take time off from my job at harvest time to help my dad cut wheat. I still feel the excitement of the approaching harvest each year. I miss the smells, the sounds, and the vibrations of the combine, but not the dust. About the time I started to school, my parents switched to the Assembly of God Church. I remained in the Assembly Church for many years. After graduation from high school, I began college at Friends University in Wichita. This was a good decision for me as I met my wife, Alice, there. I met her in the cafeteria line at Friends, and we have been meeting and eating together for many years since then. Friends University was founded by the Friends Church. The people of the Friends Church are known as the Quakers. Alice's parents were both from a long line of Quakers, and her father was a pastor in the Friends Church. Alice was born in Wichita, Kansas, but she grew up in Liberal, Kansas. I am sure Alice's parents probably expected her to find a nice Quaker boy at Friends University, so when she showed up with this Assembly of God boy, they were probably stunned. But they accepted me and always treated me well. Alice's father married us in the Friends Church in Liberal, Kansas, and we have now been married more than 53 years. Alice and I have 2 sons, Brandon and Brent. Brandon has 2 adult daughters, both married. Brandon currently lives in Boston. Our older granddaughter lives in the Kansas City area. The younger granddaughter asked me to officiate their wedding, so I did. It really stunned me when she asked me to do that. What an honor it was for me. They currently live in Manhattan, Kansas. Our other son, Brent, is married and lives in Bentonville, Arkansas. They have 2 sons, both still in high school. Prior to moving to the Springfield area after we retired, we had both lived our lives in Kansas. I spent my adult life working for the Internal Revenue Service in several posts of duty in Kansas. Alice was a business teacher in the Wichita Public High Schools and later moved into an administration position with the Wichita School District. Alice and I are RVers. We have been RVing for over 21 years. We have RV'd to all 49 states and 6 Canadian provinces. As our grandchildren were growing up, we took them on RV trips all over the country. We have great memories of these trips, but we have purchased a few gallons of diesel fuel doing it. We pulled our 5th-wheel trailer to Alaska a few years ago. That was the trip of a lifetime. Alice says we are not going to do it again, but I think it was a great experience. The road can be a little rough in places, but it was a great trip and a great drive. After we retired, we decided we didn't have to live in Wichita, so we decided to move here to the Springfield area. We have loved living in this area, and we have never regretted the move. I love organ music. When we RV, we always make it a practice to attend church wherever we go. We determined years ago that Methodist churches usually have nice organs, so we frequently visited them on our travels. So after we moved here, we decided to visit Methodist churches to check out their organs. Before long, we visited Schweitzer. Not only did we enjoy the organ, we thought the preaching was good and the people seemed friendly. So now, years later, here we are. We have very much enjoyed being a part of Schweitzer Church. We have become involved with a Sunday school class, and the church even let us both join the choir. Much of our lives revolve around Schweitzer Church. We love this church and the friends we have made here. We are excited about the growth in Schweitzer, and we are anxious to see the improvements that are coming for the facility. It's exciting times. There's something that I have never done. I have always avoided doing this. You might find this interesting. I have never smoked a cigarette in my life. They never appealed to me, so I thought it would be a waste of money. I'm probably one of the few people that has never smoked a cigarette.
It's your age, probably so.
Okay. One of my favorite things to do, as you may have picked up, is to travel. I like to drive. I've always enjoyed driving, and it is my favorite way to travel. Alice and I have traveled to Europe 3 times, and we have made a trip to Israel, Greece, and Turkey. We arrived home from the trip to Israel, Greece, and Turkey about 3 weeks before the recent war started in that region. Made us realize when we got home we were lucky that we got to do that trip. During our trip to Israel, Alice and I were both rebaptized in the Jordan River, and I floated in the Dead Sea. Alice elected to pass on entering the Dead Sea as the water in it was not particularly clean. Fortunately, there were shower facilities available for you after you got out of the Dead Sea, and that was a good thing.
Those are interesting shower facilities too.
Well, they were appreciated after being in the Dead Sea. One thing that I think is very important is regular church attendance. There has never in my life been a time when I did not attend church regularly. It has always been an important part of my life.
Wes, thanks for that summary on a lot of different things. So let's just jump in, and you've given us a good primer in terms of your background, and there's a lot of interesting things you've said. I'd love to go back to your childhood for just a little bit. We were talking about growing up in southern Kansas there, and that small town. Well, you said you were born in Anthony, right?
Yes.
But then it was Freeport.
Freeport was
really
the little town where I went to grade school.
About how big was Freeport?
Freeport had at the time, probably 25 people living in it. Right now, it's considerably smaller than that.
Then you said they unincorporated because they didn't want to keep paying taxes.
Yes.
So how much were they able to save when they unincorporated? That's a funny thing to...
I don't know, but that was the comment they made when they did it, that it was going to save them some property tax. So I don't know how much it was.
You also talked about Freeport as being the place where you and Alice will be buried beside both your grandparents or both your parents.
Yes.
How'd you come to that decision?
I have quite a number of relatives buried in that cemetery. And so I decided years ago that that's where I would like to be buried, and she was in agreement with that. And we're kind of big cemetery people anyway. On Memorial Day, we load up our vehicle from top to bottom with flowers, and we go to a number of cemeteries in Kansas and decorate a lot of graves of relatives. So we're kind of into that thing, but we enjoy it. But anyway, this cemetery has always meant a lot to me because I have quite a number of relatives there.
One of the things you also said about Freeport is that it has a lot of fond memories for you. What are a couple of those fond memories?
Well, it's a small town, so there wasn't a lot of action going on there. I used to, when I was going to grade school, I lived 6 miles from Freeport, and several times during the year, the kids would always decide we were going to ride our bikes to school. And of all the kids in the Freeport grade school, I lived the furthest from school. So they would decide to ride to school, and I had the longest ride to make. But anyway, that was kind of fun, riding my bicycle occasionally to school from there.
Mm-hmm. Was there a little grocery store in Freeport?
Yes, there was at the time. A nice little privately owned little grocery store. And it was one of these old time stores where it had shelves down the side. And if you went in there and told the lady what you wanted, she would go and get it, bring it for you. They didn't have shopping carts and things like that. It was set up in a fashion of an old store. But and it operated until I was, I don't know, probably an adult. And finally, the lady that ran the store was the husband of the guy that ran the bank. And they got too old, and their store closed. And the bank continued for many more years. But
are there any businesses still left there?
There's a grain elevator, and then there's the Presbyterian Church is still there. Those are the a post office also, but that's all is there now.
People congregate at the grain elevator?
No,
or the post
not
office
anymore.
Or
Not anymore.
Yeah. Um, do you have any siblings?
I have one sister that is 4 years younger than me, and she lives. Her name is Jane. She lives in Wichita, and she and her husband live there. And she has one daughter, our niece Erica, that also lives in Wichita, and so we see them fairly often.
Uh-huh. What was it like to spend a lot of time out in the fields? I mean, I've got an experience because I've been in those places, but what was it like?
Well, I love tractor driving. From when I first learned to do it, I enjoyed doing it, and it's a good thing because that's how I spent my summers.
Yeah.
We didn't have, of course, at that time we didn't have tractors with cabs. We had these little buggy tops that were supposed to keep us from the sun, but they didn't do a very good job. But anyway, we were grateful to have them.
Yeah.
But no, I used to drive the tractors long days. We'd get started in the morning and frequently run till after dark. And we had Minneapolis Moline tractors, the greatest tractors in the world. Minneapolis Moline's now out of business, but we had their tractors and they were good. Then later we moved to Case tractors. And so, but anyway, I spent many hours and many days on those tractors.
How about a combine? What kind of combines you run?
Well, we had you have to be a farmer to appreciate this, but we had Massey Harris combines when I was a small boy. They were Super 27 was the model. And then finally we modernized a little bit and got Gleaner combines and ran those. My dad had two of them. We had two Massey Harris combines and then two Gleaners. Then later in life, when I was in high school, we finally got a combine, a Gleaner combine with a cab and air conditioner on it. So we were in high country when we got moved up to that machine, and it was wonderful. And then after I was married and was no longer available to work all the time, he also got two Case tractors that had cabs and air conditioners on them. But when I was there and he had the cheap labor, we had just had umbrellas on our tractors, and they weren't real cool. But we were grateful for them.
Yeah, I didn't grow up with any umbrellas and no cabs, and so it was like, but a little different place. So it was nice. You talked about how you really, the smells and the sounds and the vibration of the combine is something you missed. Did you ever find anything else later in life to kind of replace that or take a place in your life like that?
Not really. I still miss that. When it gets to be harvest time, I kind of wish I could go and drive a combine for a few days. But, I don't have that opportunity anymore to do tractor driving or combine driving. So it's in the past, but I have fond memories of it.
How'd you find your way from the fields to Friends?
Well, Friends University was, I felt I'd gone to in my high school class, I had 56 in my high school class. So it was a much larger school than Freeport. Sure. But I don't know, I still felt intimidated about going to a massive university. And so I selected to go to Friends University in Wichita. And it was a university that ran about 1,000 students. It wasn't so large. Mm-hmm. And so I felt, I guess, more comfortable with that. And so that's what how I proceeded after high school.
What did you study there?
Business classes, accounting, and so on and so forth.
There have been a couple of people of significant notoriety that have come out of Friends. Richard Foster taught there in their theology department for a long time, but he wrote Celebration of Discipline. I don't know if Foster was there when you were there.
No, he wasn't, and I'm not familiar with him.
his book Celebration of Discipline is probably 35 or 40 years old and has been printed several different times, and it's done really well. And then Rich Mullins had a connection to Friends. I don't know if you ever ran into Rich.
I don't believe so.
He was a contemporary Christian music musician, but he had a connection to Friends also.
Friends has a very good music department. I was in the business department, but Friends has a very good music department, and they have a choir known as the Singing Quakers, and they were a very well-respected choir.
Mm-hmm. Were you ever in the choir?
No. I wasn't a good enough singer for that.
But you're in the Schweitzer choir.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
The Schweitzer choir is a little more forgiving than the Singing Quakers were.
I have heard the Singing Quakers once. The apprentice conference that some folks from Schweitzer have been to. I was over there one year for that, and the Singing Quakers came in and sang.
Oh.
And they sang up in the I don't know if the chapel at the time when you went there was on top of the religion building.
It was, yes, it was in the, Friends University has an old building, huge building that was built in the late 1800s. Yeah. And there's a big auditorium in there.
Yeah.
And the Quakers, the choir can perform there. Now, they do have another music, fine arts building that they do a lot of their stuff in now. But this old, the big old chapel in this 1800s building has good resonation.
Incredible acoustics.
Yeah, acoustics is the word I was trying to think of.
Mm-hmm.
Has incredible acoustics, and it's choirs sound good in it.
Yeah, it does. It's an incredible place, and I was just really interested in the fact that you went there, and then that Alice was a PK from her dad was a
Quaker
pastor.
minister. Yes.
Yeah, that's
her family had been Quakers for many years on both sides of both mother and father's family, both mother and father's families.
So she is a birthright Quaker.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, she is.
That's a whole nother story. That you can go down an interesting line of things there. After college, how'd you find a job with the IRS?
While I was in college, before I got out, I took this civil service exam. And then after I got out of college, I was looking for a job, and I got hired by the city of Wichita for a short time. But I didn't, it was a permanent job. It wasn't a short-time job. It was a permanent job. But after I got there, I really wasn't happy with that job. And so before long, I started sending out applications and applying for other jobs. And one of the applications that when I was in school, I had taken a civil service exam. And so out of the blue, one day I got a letter from the Internal Revenue Service asking me if I would be interested in a job with them. And since I was a business major and that was a business job, I took it and ended up staying for many years.
Now, I'm sure one of the images that, especially we're recording this before tax day of 2025, but many of us may think that most IRS agents spend their time around taxes or that kind of thing. But obviously, there's more work to be done in the IRS than that. So, what were some of the things you did?
Well, my job when I was first hired was an auditor, and I did auditing of tax returns, and so I would have to do interviews with people, and discuss their tax returns and their documentation and so on and so forth. After I was at the Internal Revenue Service several years, I changed over to their Criminal Investigation Division, and so then I spent the rest of my career, as my title was a special agent, as in the criminal investigation division of the Internal Revenue Service.
Do you have any cases that stand out as like really unique, or some things that you like, wow?
Well,
anything you can talk
really.
about?
Yeah, not really. I can't talk about things real specifically on that anyway. I never had a case that made national news, so I don't know if that's good or bad, but but it was an interesting line of work. I did it for many years, and I enjoyed my work there. It had good days and bad days, I guess, like any other job, but it was interesting work.
Sure. How would you talk about that work when you were home with Alice and with the boys?
Well, there wasn't really much about it that I could talk about, and they didn't know about most of it anyway. Of course, Alice always knew if I was traveling, where I was going, and stuff like that. But I couldn't talk to her about the details of the case or even really the people's names and stuff. She wasn't supposed to know. So I had to be careful what I said. But she knew what town I was going to or where I was traveling to, and so on and so forth.
What'd your boys end up doing?
Our older son lives in Boston.
Yeah.
And he is a flight attendant for Delta Airlines. And our younger son lives in Bentonville, and he's kind of self-employed, but he works with some other companies. I think it's usually companies that do business with Walmart. He worked for Walmart for a number of years himself, and then finally moved on from that. But so he does, I think, deals with companies that do business with Walmart.
So do you ever see any kind of linkage between what you were doing and then how your boys moved on?
No connection to what I did.
No.
It was entirely different. But I think they both enjoy their work, and they seem to be making a good living, so I think that's successful.
Yeah. So you went from the farm, went to friends, and then met Alice, and you guys settled down and built a life for yourself in Wichita. So.
Yes, we did. We lived in Wichita. There was a period of time when I worked for Internal Revenue Service that I did move around in Kansas. We moved to Hutchinson for about 3 years, or 2 years. Then we moved to Topeka for 2 or 3 years. Then I moved out to Hays, Kansas, in western Kansas, and I was out there 5 years. And then moved back to Wichita to the same office where I'd started at the beginning. So I did move around some in Kansas, but it all worked out. It was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wichita is a much bigger city than Springfield.
Yeah, I would say approximately twice the size of Springfield. And it's grown a lot since we left there. When we go back to Wichita now, we notice the traffic is heavier than we were used to there.
You mentioned a couple different times how significant church was, but then you mentioned where you went to church in Wichita.
In Wichita, for many years, we attended an Assembly of God church there.
Okay.
But about 10 years before we moved down here, we changed to a Church of God church, and it was the Church of God from Anderson, Indiana.
Yeah.
There's 2 churches of God's, and so you have to designate which one you're at.
Right.
But and we went to that church for 10 years after before we moved here.
Yeah. Did they have a good organ?
They did. They had an excellent organ and a nice choir. Although we didn't sing in the choir there, but their organ was a winner.
What was the thing that drew you to organ music or good organs?
It was going to Friends University. We had Friends University had a chapel we had to go to every week, and it had a dandy pipe organ in it, and they used to rev that up and rattle the building pretty good. And I just really enjoyed that music. And
Interesting.
I've liked ever since going to Fringe University, I've liked organ music.
What other kind of music do you like?
More country music, not so much pop music, but more music in the country field.
What did you listen to as a teenager?
Country music was what I usually listened to then. However, now at the current time, the music that I like best is Southern gospel music.
Okay.
And we go to a lot of concerts in Branson and Silver Dollar City when they have their Southern Gospel Festival out there. And so we make a lot of trips to Branson for concerts.
When you were growing up as a kid, did you ever have a radio on the fender of a tractor?
I did have. Yes, that was in the day when radios first started being put on tractors. And what you said is right. We had it mounted to the fender of the tractor. We didn't have a cab on the tractor. So you had to turn it up loud enough to hear. It's a wonder I can hear anything now.
It is a wonder, isn't it?
But
I think, and probably all your neighbors could hear everything that was coming through the radio on the tractor.
Yes, when you were half a mile from a tractor that was running with the radio on it, you could hear the radio.
Yeah, you could.
Because it had to be louder than the tractor.
It did.
But we had one on there. Well, actually, how we got that is I bought it for my father for Christmas. And he was kind enough to put it on.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That sounds about right.
So it was on there for several years. I listened to it a lot, and it was a wonderful improvement over not having one.
Yeah. I have a song that comes back in my mind every time a couple different songs, but one of them is a carpenter song out in a straw field, running a tractor and a baler, and listen to the carpenters out there. It was a hot, muggy night. That's what I can tell you.
And the nights are not as hot as the afternoons.
That's true. Yeah, the afternoons are hotter. What was it that, you talked about retiring, you moved to Springfield, but what was the draw to come to Springfield after you spent so much time, grew up in Kansas, built a life there, but what drew you back to Springfield?
We enjoyed coming down to Silver Dollar City.
Yeah.
And going to things there. And I have a cousin that lives here now and attends Schweitzer. And they were here before we were, though. And so we would come down and visit them and then go down to Silver Dollar City and do things and so on and so forth. And we did that for a while, and we decided we really liked it down here. So I guess the fact that they live here kind of attracted us to the area.
Mm-hmm.
We knew somebody, so it wasn't like we were completely on our own here.
That's just fascinating because, it's quite a heck of a drive from Wichita to Springfield.
And, 300 miles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good day's drive.
Mm-hmm.
Now that how long have you guys lived here?
We've been here 11 years, 12 years maybe.
Okay.
11 or 12 years.
Okay. And then was it like the moves that you made in Kansas where you entered in and found your way around? Or, how was it? Because that's a different kind of thing when you're moving.
When we moved down here, we just decided we wanted to move to Ozark. And at that time we still are. We were RVers. And so we sold our house in Wichita and we came down here and lived in our RV for about 11 months. And during that time, we bought the property before we moved here. But then once we got here, then we worked with a builder and had our house built. And so by the time from when we moved here to we got all that done and ready to move in was about 11 months.
Did you stay in the RV through winter?
Yes. And it was a cold winter. I think the coldest winter we've ever had in Springfield since we've been here. It was cold.
What's it like to live in an RV through winter? Because I've seen a few people do that, and I wonder, how do you do that?
Well, it was all right. I had to, with RVs, you have these little propane tanks, and I was going to get propane every 2 days. And so when Saturday came, I had to really pay attention to how much propane we had because it had to run till Monday morning, But it was cold. But anyway, it was fun. We survived it and had a good time. It was warm in the trailer. Our furnace worked good, but it was a bit of a challenge with the water and the propane.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Yeah,
those things can be challenging. Where's a favorite place or a couple favorite places you've been to RVing that I know you talk fondly of Alaska, but Alice said you're not going back there in the RV.
I have to say Alaska is the best.
Okay.
If you haven't driven to Alaska, I recommend you do it. But it's an experience. And we've been to all the states with it. So we've had good experiences pretty much everywhere we've gone. I don't know what to say our most favorite place is. We've just had some good experiences throughout the country.
Do you go back to any place like on a significant?
Oh, we've been down to Tennessee several times, and to the Nashville area. There's a number of places throughout the country that we've been to more than once, or have at least passed through.
Sure.
And so it's been a good experience.
What were some things you liked that you reflect fondly on about being a dad with your boys when they were younger, teenagers?
Well, I've always felt like I had a good relationship with the boys, and there's always there may be a crisis now and then, but we've always come through it, and I think both of my boys still like me. So, so I don't know. You go through all the trials of growing up and everything, and ask me that question again.
Well, what are some things you looked back? What are some things you look back fondly on about when the boys were younger? Maybe when they were, whether it's as young kids or as teenagers, or some things that you guys did together that are precious memories.
Well, I don't know. We did a lot of things together. Neither of our boys were real heavily involved in sports, so that wasn't a real big issue. They did participate in sports as they were growing up, but it didn't become something that really engulfed our life. But we've had good times just traveling around the country, and we would generally take a pretty long vacation every summer and go somewhere, sometimes clear to the end of the country, one way or the other. But it was a good experience.
Did you have an RV way back then?
Yeah, what we've always had are trailers.
Okay.
We started out with a pull behind trailer.
Yeah.
And then we later bought a large fifth wheel trailer, and so it gave us a little more room. But and after we had the trailer and the boys were grown up, we used to travel with our grandkids a lot too. We would take them on long trips. So that gave us a good experience with the grandkids as well as our own kids.
I bet that's a different experience to do that, to have both kids and grandkids with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do the boys, do they RV?
No, neither one of them do.
No?
They don't seem to be interested in it. So, No, they both still like to travel. Well, the older one is a flight attendant, so he flies around the world, different places. But the younger boy, he and his family do a lot of traveling too, vacationing too. They've gone to Disney several times in Florida, and they've been to both coasts and are travelers. Also, although they generally fly places, they're not. My son's not so much into driving as I am.
One of the things I've found interesting, just reflecting on my own life and then watching my kids, is that some things skip generations, but they seem to stay within the family. Some historical things stay within the family. So maybe your grandkids will grow up loving to drive.
I don't know.
Go fifth wheeling. Who knows?
Nobody seems to be wanting to get into RVing at the current time.
Well,
and my son, that's the flies all the time. He's not too much into long drives.
I bet not. When you think about you talked about the significance of church. Do you have any passages of scripture that stick to your ribs?
I don't think I would have necessarily one specific or a specific scripture that applies. I do, try to spend time reading the Bible and stuff, but I'm not really good at memorizing stuff, and so I can't quote you a lot of scripture verbatim. So I don't know how to answer that.
Well, that's fair enough. I'm not very good at memorizing stuff either. So, the one thing that does stick with me is probably the shortest verse of the scriptures. You know what it is?
Jesus wept.
There you go. See, everybody's got to have one. You got to have at least one.
That's one I could memorize.
There you go. No, I could too. When you think about the future, what are you looking forward to?
Well, I'm already retired, so I'm not working now. Neither one of us are. And so we just enjoy life, and we like to spend time with our grandkids. Our grandsons live in Bentonville, and our granddaughters, one lives in Kansas City and one in Manhattan, Kansas. So they're relatively close to us. And we get together with all of them, not at the same time, but we interact with all of them regularly.
Mm-hmm.
And so we enjoy that, and they seem to enjoy it too. So that's good.
That is good. Do you have a bucket list of things you want to do?
Not particularly. One of the things I always wanted to do was to take a trip to the Holy Land, and we did that. And so that was a very fulfilling experience, and one we really enjoyed. The other place we would like to go is to Australia, and we have not been there. However, we kind of have that on our radar, that we might try to work that in before too much more time passes.
You gonna take a ship or you gonna take an airplane?
I think it would be an airplane.
Yeah.
I would go by ship, but I think Alice is going to require an airplane. Not require, but demand an airplane.
And then choral music. You said you like to sing in the choir. And
yes.
You got any favorite songs you like to sing?
Oh my! I'm sure I do, but I don't know how to answer that right now. I hadn't thought about that.
No, that's okay. I don't know if there's anything that you like. Oh, I loved it. I love it when we come back around to that song. Or
I do have songs like that, but I don't know how to answer that.
Okay. Lord of the Dance?
No. No, that's not it. That one's way down low on my list.
Morning is Broken.
Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty.
Okay. All right. That'll work. Well, Wes, thanks for coming in today. I tend to ask folks at the end of a conversation like this, like, is there a piece of wisdom or something that you've been told or that you carry with you that you tend to share with others?
I don't know if I have a piece of wisdom, but I think that relationships are so important, and with both family and friends, you can have such wonderful interaction with people as you share life together, and I think those are important, and it makes you feel part of a group or part of a family, not lonely. And I just think that people just need to work to develop friendships, and sometimes you have to put a little effort into it to kind of draw yourself closer to another individual. But I think that relationships are very rewarding and worth the effort to nurture.
Mm-hmm. They are. Thank you. Thanks for that. Thanks for coming in and sharing your story.
It's been interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. A big thank you to Wes for sharing his story. In listening, I hope that you were inspired, encouraged, and challenged, and that you begin to behold the really cool people around you each and every day. The Really Cool People podcast is produced by Schweitzer Church, Springfield, Mo. Taylor Likes is our executive producer and editor, and I'm your host, Jason Leininger. You can help us out by liking, reviewing, and sharing this podcast. Until next time, stay cool.